Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So today will be slightly different. It will be something that might be quite triggering, but also eye-opening. At the end of last month, a gentleman by the name of Cameron Ritter published a book titled Confessions of a Freight Broker. And when I found out about this book, obviously I got it and I read it in a span of 2 days. A lot of things mentioned in that book were things that I knew were true. Then there were things that just confirmed what I thought was true about freight brokers. And finally, there were some moments that were absolutely shocking and not in a good way. In my opinion, this book is damning for freight brokers, not just in the eyes of carriers, but also in the eyes of those customers who use brokerage services. Now, before we get into this video, there are 3 things I want to mention right off the bat. Number 1, this is not a sponsored video. Number 2, it can be quite triggering. And number 3, the author is someone I commend for having the guts to publish something like this. So let's chat about it. Ready? Let's go! So those of us who rely on the spot market, the load boards in any way, it can be full-time, it can be just for backhauls, you are dealing with brokers. But the thing is, we don't really give much thought to how a broker actually operates. Yeah, of course, we know that they get a load from a customer, they take their margin, and then they try to sell the load to the cheapest truck in order to make more money for themselves. Well, Ritter wrote a book describing his experience, his first experience being a freight broker in an apparently well-known brokerage, which I did find out what that brokerage was. I'm not going to mention it here, but you can search it up. And I'll tell you, reading this book, there were a couple of moments that I'm not ashamed to say they made me tear up just because I didn't realize how upper management can demonize carriers in order to get as many sales as possible. Now, is this book 100% the truth like a documentary? I don't know. I know that Mr. Ritter did say that these are things that he has heard on the phone, things that he has seen, and things he has read about. But maybe I'm going to try and get an interview with Cameron Ritter so that he can clarify what the experience was actually like for him. So what have I learned from this book? Well, number 1 is that brokers see truckers as evil opportunists. At one point, Ritter describes a situation where a trucking consultant comes to the freight brokerage and says, and I'm going to quote this, "Truckers are not your friends. They are a necessary evil that we brokers have to deal with because we don't have our own trucks." Now, this whole theme of truckers being evil or truckers being con artists or truckers being some opportunists, this theme runs throughout the whole book pretty much. Number 2, brokers sometimes stereotyped carriers by their business address. Now, this one shocked the crap out of me, but I also learned finally why some brokers refuse to work with us because we're a California carrier. At one point in the book, during a broker meeting, the sales manager decides to give them a geography lesson, and I'm going to quote this directly from the book. "Northern California is Indians. Southern California is Armenians. Midwest is Americans. Texas is Mexicans. The South, rednecks and Cubans. Chicago, Russians and Ukrainians. Northeast, Eastern Europeans, and Chinese." Now, if that's not bad enough, the book continues to describe how the sales manager is telling the brokers to avoid the Glendale gang. Now, for those of you who don't know, Glendale is somewhere where a lot of the Armenian population lives. So basically what the sales manager is telling his freight brokers is that all Armenians are con artists, so avoid them like the plague. And the sales manager continues to say that if you find a trucker whose name ends in Yan, this is a very common ending for an Armenian last name. Basically, he's telling the brokers that don't work with anyone whose last name ends in Yan. And basically, they stereotype, for example, California, this is a place where you do not work with carriers because they're likely to be con artists. It's appalling. Number 3 is something that most of us are aware of unless we're very, very new to this industry and we're still holding on to some hope of business relationships. Broker-carrier relationships do not exist. This is something that I learned through personal experience. The book just confirmed to what degree they do not matter, those broker-carrier relationships. This is a game of money. Relationships mean nothing if that broker finds a carrier who's going to haul his or her freight for a cheaper rate. Number 4, and this one was pretty shocking to me. Brokers have the ability to pretty much destroy carriers who work with direct shippers. In a particularly interesting segment of this book, the author describes how this brokerage found a new customer, a steel manufacturer, who already had carriers that they have been working with. But the brokerage promised them that they will save them money as long as they get the loads to broker out. So what does the brokerage do? Well, they call each carrier on that list who has been working sometimes for decades with this manufacturer directly and say, and I quote, either cut your rate by 200 or you're out. And what's more interesting, and I quote, then we, the brokerage, add our $100 markup on top. Brokerage makes $100 per load and customer saves more money on trucks. Number 5, brokers screw over their customers just as much as carriers, just in a different way. I never understood how is it possible that a brokerage can get a ton of loads from a shipper when the brokerage does not have trucks that they can guarantee to that shipper, because a lot of brokerages are not asset-based. I thought it was some intricate plan of making a deal with some specific carriers and then getting the loads. But no, they get their loads in a much simpler way. They lie. Many times they'll simply go to Google Maps, call a shipper and say, hey, I have a truck down the street from you ready in an hour. Do you have any loads for me? And this is considering that they don't have a single truck. And sometimes the shipper will say, yeah, I actually have a load that has to pick up within 2 hours. And that's when the broker starts frantically posting the load, trying to find a truck to cover that load. Sometimes they succeed and they make the customer happy. Sometimes they're not able to find the truck, lie to the customer that there was a breakdown, and of course end up losing that customer. And number 6, brokers play the long game with customers. I don't want to use the term long con. It's not quite a con, but it's a sales tactic, I suppose. But yeah, I'm just going to quote this directly from the book. This is a broker who specializes on the sales side where she actually gets customers. She's talking to a grinder. A grinder is someone that we talk to every single day, negotiating rates and so on and so forth. So she says, when we land a new customer, we go in real low on the rates, so low that we're usually losing money. Then we keep the rates low for a while, just long enough to starve off our competitors. We wait some more. Then when the timing's right, we start inching the rates up, $10 here, $20 there. If we do this slowly enough, the customers never notice. It's like boiling frogs. So yeah, guys, these are the top 6 things that I have learned from this book. There are a ton of other things. I just didn't have time to add them all into one video. If you're interested, I believe this book, I got it from Amazon. So if you're interested, it is on Amazon. It is pretty difficult to read from an emotional standpoint, especially considering the challenges we have been facing for over 3 years now. But this book also, it opened up my eyes so much so that it gave me an idea, and I'm going to implement it. And if it works, I'm going to share it with all of you. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining and watching today. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning. See you in the next video.